You're listening to OPIS Talks, where you'll be in on conversations with insiders in the energy, chemicals, and environmental commodities markets. Guests share insights into the latest trends and innovations, industry challenges, and much more. Let's dive into the conversations that explore where the energy economy is headed, right here on OPIS Talks.
Hello, and welcome to our new OPIS podcast called OPIS Talks, where subject matter experts from OPIS will discuss topics really throughout the supply chain for upstream, downstream petroleum, renewable fuels, and everything in between. I'm Denton Cinquegrana, Chief Oil Analyst here at OPIS, and I do have a co-host here with me, so I'm going to give him a second to introduce himself.
Hello and welcome, guys. My name is Brandon Gormley. I'm the Client Success Director here with the organization, and I guess I'm technically the new guy. We're two hosts that you'll hear from in upcoming monthly podcasts coming to you from OPIS starting this summer.
Yeah, and the best part for you guys as listening here is that you don't just have to hear us two babbling along. We're going to be inviting guests from all throughout the industry, and we're going to just have off the cuff conversations to help you stay in the know and ahead of the curve, and really what's happening out there. So some of the topics that Brandon and I will cover along with other OPIS hosts include, there's a lot of data out there. Our gasoline demand data, for example, says that same-store gallons are down. We're going to get some experts in here to say, within the industry, to say, hey, we see that, or no, we're seeing something else. Not just demand data, all different data sets. How do we use that? How do we look at it? How do you running convenience stores or gas stations, how do you use that data for better operations?
Yeah, that's a great point, Denton. Really the idea here is, not to necessarily hear directly from one person or two person. It's really to kind of get, just different perspectives from subject matter experts. And to be quite honest with you, I hate to hear myself talk, and I've heard you talk enough that I kind of get sort of zoned out and bored from that too. So hearing from other people and getting new perspectives on different hot topics, I guess you could say, and just getting their takes, I think is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, no, and like you, I hate the sound of my own voice, but also, margins. We're in this environment where margins are pretty strong. Is that going to last into perpetuity? At some point, you got to think there's going to come a tipping point. So we'll have discussions on that. Some of the current trends and challenges, technology and convenience stores. One of the biggest topics out there nowadays is decarbonization. How do we get there? And we're led to believe that maybe electrification is the only way to do it, but there's probably other ways. So we'll get people to come in and talk about that. And as obviously climate change policies get more rigorous, how do those in the downstream space, kind of adjust on those operations? So here we are. That's just our introduction, but you know what, Brandon, while I got you here, let's kick it off with an episode here. Like you said, you're the new guy here. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you chose to come to OPIS.
I started with OPIS back in November. Prior to that, I worked with Cumberland Farms, which then became EG America, MAPCO, which now is Majors. And I've been an individual contributor. I've led fuel pricing teams in both of those organizations, business intelligence, inside store pricing teams, worked with a number of really great people, and really spent my entire career thus far using OPIS products. I've used their demand information. I've used their market share information. I've used some of their new pricing tools and analytic tools. Really got really great performance out of it. But really, my career has really been in analytics and retail fuel pricing.
Okay, so you basically bought fuel, you've priced fuel, you've sold fuel, versus me, who's just a guy who is on the outside looking in and just giving my opinions. Whether people like it or not, you're getting my opinion on what's happening out there. But, as a retailer, what are some of the kind of biggest challenges you faced? I mean, we talked about declining volumes and really shrinking demand. In my own personal opinion, here you go, you're going to get my opinion no matter what. But I think 2019 may have been the peak for gasoline demand. The pandemic brought that on from 2020. You do have a little bit of EVs chewing into that, but really kind of vehicle efficiency is number one, the biggest factor in declining demand. So what are some of the challenges? I think I probably answered my own question here, but demand, what else did you see as a challenge in your time as a retailer?
Yeah, so demand is one of those things. It's almost like gas prices for consumers, right? Like prices go down. It becomes a political weapon. When you talk about demand to retailers, like it almost is equally as triggering. But take a step back. What you just first said is exactly true. Speaking in specifically to fuel efficiency. Fuel efficiency rates have continued to increase, like as a foundation, right? Like that's not that pandemic related. That's been sort of an underlying factor that has continued up. And what I mean by fuel efficiency rates is if you think about the number of gallons sold across the U.S. or across any sort of geography, basically the miles per gallon that vehicles are traveling on those gallons sold has increased. I think the last time that I looked at it, it's really close to around 2%, a year for the last few years. And there's probably some speculation that that's going to be a consistent trend, or it's going to start ramping up. Like 2% becomes 2.5%, or 2.5 becomes 3%. A lot more exponentially. So that's one factor. And then the second biggest factor, that we've sort of had to deal with is consumer mobility. And that drastically changed during 2019. So, to think back when I started back in 2013, we constantly used year over year volume performance as a metric. Week over week, year over year, gallons were sort of the central theme there around what we sort of tried to shoot for in terms of performance metric. And that made sense, right? For a number of years, if you could consistently sort of grow, and the overall pie was growing at a certain percentage, you could use that to some degree with confidence around, did you grow at that same rate? Did you maybe you increased your market share and you grew at a faster rate or something like that on a same store basis? Then we entered 2019, right? And then it's like, holy crap, people work from home. That commute into an office in the morning, that commute from home, that got thrown sideways, but not equally, right? So you really can't broad brush it. You really can't say, the U.S. just went through this whole thing. It's like, well, the Southeast experienced a very different pandemic than, say, the Northeast, or the Northeast experienced a very different pandemic than the West Coast. Each state was somewhat different, and that's kind of why I say what I say about that the demand is somewhat triggering, because if you throw out there, well, demand's in decline, or like demand's pretty flat, I can guarantee you someone's out there is like, well, mine's not. And that could very well be the case, right? Because, think about the migration that happened from California to Texas, right? Or the amount of people that are moving into Nashville. Those markets are really hot markets right now. Like they're markets like Florida has been and was, for the last 10 years. Like there's a huge amount of people that migrate there. Well, yeah, your demand story may be very different. A lot of what we sort of publish here at OPIS, and we track from a demand or a market share point of view, is more close to like a same store metric, right? And it's more generalized to the US. And we track EIA, we track same store gallons that we get direct from retailers. And based on those observations, I would tend to agree with you. Demand is definitely flattening out, and I would even go as far as saying it's starting to decline.
So now that we've identified, kind of what is the biggest challenge right now here in the summer of 2024 in your time, and you can think back to it, how did you solve some of those challenges?
Yeah, it's really, really good questions. And some of those were really easier to solve for than others, to be quite honest with you. One thing that's been a huge tailwind is the amount of data that companies now have access to. The breadth and depth of it is so much better than what it was yesterday. Every day, there's a new startup, a new company, existing companies that are coming out with new insights and new analytical tools to provide information to help make data-driven decisions, right? That's a big theme, right? So I'm really fortunate that my role within OPIS here is I get to talk to a lot of customers, like a lot of people that were sitting in my seat before I joined here. And I can't tell you how many times data-driven decisions, that term continues to come up. That's a really big common theme right now. And if you think about these headwinds, whether it be fuel efficiency and whether it be understanding consumer transactions and how they're engaging and what their experience is with your brand, the key to success is collaboration, surrounding yourself with really great people who are open-minded, and basically just exhausting every resource that you have to understand what data is out there and is it right? Is it, can you rely on it, and what its use is? The monetary value of information right now is pretty incredible. So to overcome a lot of these really complex challenges, it's like I said, it's a lot of internal conversation, it's a lot of reflection, and it's being open to using different data sources and different mechanisms that may have not been so traditional in the past to sort of overcome them.
Obviously, profits is clearly a very important metric. But were there any, using that data, using that team approach, were there any other sort of metrics that you use to say, hey, we got this right, or hey, next time we should probably do this instead? Was there anything in particular that you like to look at?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, as a fuel retailer, like, you always want to maintain or continue to grow your market share. So it's like, okay, so what do we mean by market share? Is that the number? Is that wallet share? Is that the number of transactions? Is that the number of gallons? Like that can be dissected quite a bit. But market share is a huge metric. We may get into this a little bit later, but coming to the table with as much M&A activity as what's going on right now, with a consistent record of growing market share, or at least maintaining your market share, drives brand value up quite a bit right now. So market share has always been first and foremost. I mean, there's some things baked in terms of financial figures, right? Average ticket. Food service has been a really popular aspect of convenience stores right now. And I'm sort of just generalizing. It's not necessarily just fuel. With the decline in fuel sales and the decline in tobacco, the obvious thing to sort of recoup some of those lost dollars is to build out or add QSRs or some sort of food option to sort of curb some of that. So there's a lot of metrics that can be used there. Obviously, margin, right? CPG, right? So overall profitability for a particular brand. Now, a lot of that's going to be driven by the different regions or the different geographies. You can't just go out and just price however you want to. You sort of have to work within the confines of what you as a brand are able to do and what the market is sort of giving you, so to say. You track that on a daily, if not weekly basis, right? So, just because cost goes up or cost goes down doesn't necessarily mean that you can go out and hit a certain number, right? You have to sort of live within some guardrails there, just for the long-term health of a particular brand.
And I just want to kind of dig in a little bit more on one thing you just mentioned, margins. They're pretty strong right now. May was very strong. June kind of weakening a little bit. It's June 28th for those listening. So this is when we're recording this. What's your perspective there? Higher margins, are they going to stay there? Are they going to decline? I mean, obviously, you don't stay steady. It moves on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, etc. But what's your thoughts on the kind of higher margin environment that we're sort of living in right now?
I was talking to Tom Closa about this a little bit. The running joke that we have is, margins are going to be high until they're not. It's like, well, yeah, like that's it's a fairly easy statement to make. But if you take a look at just overall margins, rack to retail margins, at least on the gas side, I haven't really seen too many data points that would tell me that margins are going to plateau anytime soon. I would actually make the argument that I would expect them to continue to grow in years to come. Now, you're a lot more closer to like what the next 6 months is going to look like, right? Like just the way that you're sort of connected and tuned into, the refinery capacity and what's going on with different production and things like that. So that would be something I would actually be curious to kind of get your thoughts on, at least over the next year, like how our margin's going to work out this year. I would say over the long term, like you're talking, year, 3 years, 5 years out, I would actually make the argument that, yeah, we're going to see margins continue to increase. Now, is 40 the new 20? I would say that, the biggest dictator to that is going to be volume. And that's why I'm so confident in what I'm saying around the margin increases, because we're actually starting to see those same store gallons decrease. If you sort of take a look at those two together, it's a pretty clear picture. Like, C stores are going to maintain their forecourt profitability regardless of what's going. The easiest lever to pull is your fuel price. Like, you can make that happen in 5 seconds. Like, there can be a change out at the pump. So station by station profitability has maintained, if not increased. So if you have a declining volume, that means your margins increased. So if we're going to make the statement that volumes are declining, then I would be more than comfortable making the statement that I would personally see margins continue to increase just because of that profitability factor. But that's actually a good question. Like, where do you see margins just over the next 6 months? Like, as you sit here today, obviously anything can change tomorrow. But as you sit here today, how do you sort of see like the rest of this year playing out?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. And you kind of stole my line here a couple times in presentations. I would say 30 cents was the new 20 cents. I undershot that by about 10 cents because, yeah, we're seeing that 40 cents gross pretty consistently. But a couple of other factors that come to mind for me, at least, is, labor costs continue to go up. Real estate is not cheap. You have high interest rates. So those are like, just costs that the retailer has to incur. So you almost need this stronger margin environment to help maintain that. That being said, over the next, say, 6 months or the rest of 2024, I still think we're in this kind of solid to higher margin environment. And, at the end of the day, these things are very, very cyclical. You see margins get squeezed in the kind of early spring. And then when the futures market, spot markets start to fall off, once we've kind of entered, kind of late April, early mid-May, that's when you see margins. There's just such an inverse correlation between, RBOB futures, gasoline futures, if you will, and the margin. And seasonality obviously plays a huge role. So we'll see, even though we're pretty strong right now, you'll get probably, again, a lot will depend on the weather this summer. Whether we have an active storm season, which is being forecasted, you're going to see those margins get squeezed as the spot market goes up, and you have the quote unquote storm chasers chasing gasoline higher on a just in case basis. But then, hopefully, there's no massive storms and no major damage anywhere here in the country, you'll see the market fall off quick, and those margins will shoot right back. But generally speaking, market's very cyclical. It's kind of almost easy to predict. So, as you get towards that transition from summer grade gasoline to winter grade gasoline, you get another pop there. In the last 100 days of the year or so, you see lower retail gasoline prices, kind of the lowest of the year typically. And you might see spot markets and futures markets. Gasoline futures tend to have their bottom sometime in mid-December. Maybe sometimes it's early January. But for the most part, around that time, you see another pop in margins. But there's times where they do get squeezed. But I do think, for the next 6 months or so, we're in this relatively strong margin environment. But again, like you said before, everything can change in a day. And I think storms and weather is kind of that wild card. If we do get pretty stormy activity, sure, we could get margin squeezed pretty good. And if we don't, we might get a short-term squeeze, and then it re-expands back out to kind of where it's been. So spent a few minutes here on margins, but what about kind of the big box retailers? I think back to 2022 when prices went really, really high. A lot of people switched over to going to like Costco and Sam's Club and BJ's for gasoline. Back in your days in the industry, how did you view them as competitors?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's a really interesting dynamic that's being played out right now. So let's just pretend COVID-19 didn't happen, right? So sort of like business as usual, to some degree with with what's going on. Anytime that retails get high, we sort of noticed a little bit of a market share shift. Consumers would sort of start gravitating towards those big box offerings, especially if the delta got high enough between what would be a traditional C store and say a big box. So like today, Like a lot of those players sit, anywhere between 25 and 30 cents, sort of below like the retails. And right now that may be enough to sort of sway people, right? But really convenience is a huge factor in where and how people make decisions, especially with retail, but for convenience stores too. When the pandemic happened, there was a couple of things going on. One, there was panic buying, right? So you had people going out and buying like of everything. I would say that was a huge catalyst for big box and member club stores, where that acted as like a tailwind, right? They were able to increase memberships over a 12-month, 24-month period of time. And I think that they've kind of hung on to them. Like they've really sort of like put a lot of marketing campaigns together, nurturing campaigns to try to keep as many of those members as they could. They've really won quite a bit. Now, I will say this. Now we're sort of like, we're sort of done with the pandemic to some degree. Like we're sort of over that hump. Retails have started to come back down, and we've actually started to see some of that market share kind of shift back to some of those more traditional like convenience retail sort of players, and which is really interesting. So it almost seems like retails right now sort of dictate how far people are willing to drive for that discount. It's a big challenge right now for traditional C-stores to try to gain some of that market share back. A lot of progress has been made with loyalty programs, for sure, and a lot of investment made into the technology behind those loyalty programs, which has been really interesting. So I can't think of too many sizable retailers out there that don't have some sort of rewards program or loyalty program, and I think that's made a difference for sure.
Just so everyone knows, we're going to try and limit these to 20 to 30 minutes or so. So we're going to just throw one or two more questions at Brandon. So, and then we'll wrap it up here. But where do you see the future of this business going? Get the crystal ball out, and if you end up being wrong, I am certainly going to call you out on it.
Yeah, no, I know you'll be the first person for sure. even after this gets published, I imagine that you're going to create a user and start commenting. There's a lot of themes going on right now. I think consumers are transacting with retail a lot different than what they used to. There's a new generation that is starting to become, take the lion's share of being the consumer within the retail store space, or just the retail space, just in general. Buying fuel and lottery tickets and going in for those convenience items, that really can't be done online, right? Like you can't order 10 gallons of fuel from Amazon, at least today, right? So I'm sure they looked at it, but one of the things that I've sort of paid attention to in sort of how this space is kind of changing is, one, it's M&A, right? There's a ton of M&A activity going on. And that's actually increasing, right? So some of these larger players are continuing to acquire some of the smaller chains, and then go through a rebranding exercise and take market share that way. The new to industry locations that are being built are absolutely gorgeous, and that's across a number of different brands out there. It almost seems like every year they're like one-upping each other. Like, oh my gosh, like, we put a helicopter pad on the top of the roof, and it's just like, oh, that's cool. I didn't even know that was like a thing. But like, there's like, just everything that they're throwing at convenience stores right now. They're huge, beautiful, well-lit locations with really clean bathrooms, and they require a lot of land, right? So they're saying, okay, well, let's put a car wash on here. Let's put a dog wash on here. Like, what else? Let's do EV chargers, right? So I think to some degree, I think we're trying to figure that out, just by happenstance of let's throw everything at the wall and kind of see what happens. The other thing that I'm noticing right now is stores are taking on a different format, right? Take a look at Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's has sort of said, okay, travel center, okay, convenience store. We're not going to be either one of those. Like, we're just going to be our own thing. And, they're building these massive locations that, from the data that we can see and collect on our side through some of our new tools, their reach in terms of where customers are coming from and their market share and everything like that is amazing, is absolutely amazing. So I'm actually surprised that more retailers haven't thought or considered about replicating that model, at least to kind of try it out a little bit, but we'll see. And I sort of touched on EVs to some degree. A lot of retailers out there right now are putting in the infrastructure just to sort of at least offer EV at some point in time, if it sort of catches on, if not going out and just saying, here's dedicated EV charging spots. And I've heard mixed results on those. I heard some locations are really great, and I've heard other locations are just doing okay. I think we're at a crossroads right now for sure. Like, we're not really quite sure like exactly like what the clear path is here, but there's some really great brands out there that are trying some really creative things, some really unique things. So I'm excited. Like, it's, what the convenience store looks like in 10 years versus what it does today. I think it's going to be a lot different.
And I think one thing, Brandon, you and I should do here as we get more and more, get more guests and have these conversations is just ask a random question. Has nothing to do with their business or what they do on a day-to-day basis. But I do know that you're from Gettysburg. You moved back recently to Gettysburg. In school, were you forced to recite the Gettysburg Address, and can you do it right now?
Fourth grade, we had
and past 7 years ago. Everyone can do that.
I can't do it anymore. I can't. But we had to do it in fourth grade. I remember the day that we had to do it. We all had to stand in a line, and the teacher, she helped us out a little bit here and there, but yeah, every kid had to memorize it and recite it back by memory and everything like that. So yeah, I literally just moved back about a month ago. So I had grown up here, spent tons of time here, playing sports and everything like that. And then, moved around to the Northeast and then back down to Tennessee and Nashville, where I was working with MAPCO, and now I'm back. So it's really great. Small town feel, really great people. Can't really say too much about it. Definitely a different pace than Nashville, for sure. But yeah, no, it's a fun time. Glad to be back here, and now I'm closer to you guys, closer to the office, closer to New York. So I'm looking forward to getting together soon.
I'm so happy you're part of the team. I really enjoyed the times we've spent together at various conferences. But that's all we got for this episode here. Stay tuned. We'll be bringing these to you once a month, probably maybe even more frequently, should there be demand for it. There's that demand word again. On behalf of Brandon Gormley, I'm Denton Cinquegrana, and we'll see you next time.
We hope you've enjoyed today's insider conversation on OPIS Talks. Join us next time for a deep dive into another industry insider's world. You can find more OPIS Talks episodes at opisnet.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.